Time to ring in another Ron Spomer Outdoors podcast. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. Gosh, deer season is just a few weeks away, and that reminds me, you need a hunting knife, you need a deer hunting knife, and this little guy is one. It might not look like it. It's a Knives of Alaska little folding pocket knife. It's called the Featherweight Hunter, and I like Featherweight. Why have a bunch of extra weight pulling your jeans down while you're out there wandering the fields? Yeah, ultimately I like a sheath knife. A hunting knife belongs on your hip, on a sheath. I've got plenty of those and I love them, but I also like these little folders. They're a small, easy to use little blade. You can work such fine detail with that little blade. It's got a little jimping on the back for your finger so you don't slip off. And you've just got great control with a small knife like this, and it's always in your pocket. This is a locker, of course. Push the button and you can close it, but when it's open, it is locked, and that knife blade is not going to close on you. So, synthetic handle, see right through it, lightweight. That's why I love it. Heck, I usually keep one in my pocket and one on my sheath. You want to find some good knives for your deer hunt, check out Knives of Alaska. Say, guys, I rang the bell to start this show because recently we had someone buy a bell on our website, ronspomeroutdoors.com, and he had picked a bell that had already sold. We had forgotten to take it down and mark it as sold, but the man who makes these bells, Doug Adams, who is our neighbor and one heck of a fine gentleman, he called up this guy who bought one and told him, I'm sorry, but that particular model is gone, but I'll make you a custom if you'd like. Well, of course he would like. Not only did Doug make him a one-of-a-kind custom, but that gentleman sent in some of his old iron, and Doug used that to make the bell. It's a special treat. If you're looking for something special like that, just look into Doug Adams, the bell maker. He's got a website. I think if you look under Doug Adams and the bells, you'll find him. And otherwise, you can go to Ron Spomer Outdoors, look on our website for some of those bells. If it says sold out, just contact us anyway and ask us if you can't get a hold of Doug and get yourself a custom. Now, we're getting all kinds of wonderful comments and corrections from our friends across the spectrum, whether it comes from YouTube or Facebook or Ron Spomer Outdoors website, some of our videos. It's just always great to hear from you guys. You keep things lively around here. We especially want to thank our patrons, of course. Those guys come up with some crazy ideas, and we have some wonderful times, especially at our monthly meetups. We've got another one coming up here in a few days. It'll be over with before you hear this broadcast. But once a month, we meet with our Tier 3 and higher patrons, and we just have a great discussion about all kinds of things pertaining to hunting, how to go about it, where to go, when to go, cartridges to use, good bullets we've tested in the past, and we all share our adventures. It is like sitting around a campfire. Now, I want to talk about what Edward Howard 4708 had to comment on, and it is the video we did comparing the 22 Creedmoor, a new 22 cartridge, against all the other centerfire 22s. And some people really enjoyed this, and other ones like, what's the point? Who uses a 22 for anything? We'll get into a little bit more of that, but let's just see what Edward has to say. Hey, terrific video, Ron. There you go. Somebody liked it. There is a broad array of factory cartridges, but not always exactly what one might want. We're fortunate to have such a robust firearms industry that supports wildcatting. I have a dream to shorten the 6mm BR to fit a Howa Mini Action. That way I'll get a smidge more powder capacity than a 6mm ARC in the same overall length cartridge. Your video inspired this idea to neck down a 30 RAR to 6.5 or possibly 257 and create something with a bit more heft that would again fit in a mini action. I suppose in both cases obtaining brass would be a difficult part. I might have to settle for, say, the 6mm Max or the 6mm ARC or even the 24 Varminter, but I still consider myself fortunate to have alternatives to the 243 Winchester. Now, the 25W SSM is more spice than I want, but it's still a neat idea. You might neck that up to 270, and that might be a good ultra-short replacement for the old 270 Winchester. Well, there you go, guys. I mostly hear from you about how we have too many cartridges, too many options, and it's all redundant. And then we come up with someone like Edward who still wants to create a wildcat. There's not too many 22 cartridges. Seems kind of crazy, but this is the world we live in, guys. Some of us like new things. Some of us like to, say, backyard mechanic and redesign slightly just for that little bit of perfection we want. I can understand what he's coming at here with this Howa Mini action. It's a super short little action, bolt action. Wonderfully accurate. I've tried one in several chamberings, and they really are sweet. And if you want something like that with just the right cartridge, pushing just the right weight bullet and all the rest, you can still wildcat those and design your own. So still alive and well despite all the factory cartridges we now have. Now, here is another take on that same subject. 22 Creedmoor versus all other 22s, and I am Ragan 9432 writes in and says, hearing the 222 Remington, that immediately made me think of my mom. She had a small rifle that she just loved most of her life. She had saved and bought that rifle to ward off coyotes, and she sure loved that thing. Well, I have no idea what happened to that rifle. I saw it in the closet for most of my life. Yeah, I hear you on that one. Most of us say, I missed the rifle that I sold once. We don't usually say, I missed the rifle my mom had, but that would be an extra special treat to have the rifle that was around when you were a boy on the farm and your mom used it. I spoke with a gentleman once in Africa who told me a story of when he was 5 or 6. He remembered his mother opened the door, stuck the rifle out, and shot a lion in the front yard, killing one of their goats. That takes it to a whole new level. So, yeah, guys are generally complaining that they wish they had never sold that rifle, whatever it was, one of theirs, one of their dads, one of their grandpas. But when we're younger and finances are tight and we get starry-eyed for that new rifle that's on being advertised, and we sell our old one to get it, and then years later we realize the old one was probably the better deal all along, a little too late. So if you can, guys, hang on to those old rifles if they shoot well for you, or you've taken your first deer with it or something special. That rifle will grow and become a family heirloom if you can hang on to it at all. Now here is the gentleman, James, who is complaining about too many 22 cartridges. He says, personally, I have no use for any of them. And what can they do that the almost antique 270 cannot? Well, it depends on your perspective. I wrote back to James and I said, hey, if it works for you, James, stick with that 270. But I can tell you what the 22s do that the 270 doesn't. 1, there's less recoil. 2, they cost slightly less per shot. And 3, most of them will shoot flatter and leave less pelt damage. And that's what mostly the 22s are used for, I think, is hunting coyotes and foxes and bobcats and stuff, if not just varmints like rockchucks and marmots. But the little 22 bullet will preserve your pelt, your little hole going in, and then the bullet explodes inside, and you've got a beautiful pelt that you can make to use jackets and clothing and wall hangings, whatever else you'd need. So that's kind of why they're out there. Now, there's a 30-30, a standard deer hunting cartridge. Everybody loves it, but I like to poke the bear now and then. So I did a piece on the 30-30 being a joke. I can't remember if this was a video or a blog or both, but at any rate, it was done quite a few years ago, and I heard from Brian, who had just seen it. And he is telling us about the 30-30 and what his opinion is. And this one is kind of a long one, but if I remember, it's kind of funny. Let's see what Brian has to say. He says, if you create something perfect, tomorrow morning somebody will create something that's better. Usually it's a gun maker. Well, oh no, 30-30, that's not good enough. You've got to have a 270. Oh, well, the 270, that's no longer any good. You've got to have a 6.5 Creedmoor. Tomorrow, somebody will say, no, 6.5 Creedmoor is a thing of the past. You need a 301 Remington Sub-Mag with its new blender blade boat-tailed bullet with a patented tungsten plunger expansion receptacle. Told you he was going to get kind of funny. You don't need patented scent blocking technology clothes. You don't need a replaceable blade knife, cover scent spray, laundry detergent, hand soap, a salt block lure, an expensive feeder, 800 pounds of corn, a ladder stand, a climbing stand, special gloves, camo face mask, camo soled boots, rechargeable hand warmers, black lights, thermal carcass finders, electronic collars, fake antlers, or any combination of $2,500 worth of junk that they tricked you into buying. What you do need is a Winchester or a Marlin 30-30 or something like that, a knife, a warm plaid coat, and a whole bunch of sit still and shut up. A little woodsmanship skill from being in the woods and a place to hunt where there are some deer that other hunters haven't driven into a frenzy of fear. That's all you need to be a successful deer hunter. So quit letting the manufacturers say what you need and let experience make you into a woodsman who can kill deer with a 36 caliber muzzleloader like Davy Crockett did regularly, or a homemade bow and a flint arrow. I fail to understand why people think they need an Olympic match-grade precision rifle and all that other junk when Daniel Boone got his deer while wearing buckskins, and he's used some of the worst equipment in the history of firearms. I could understand it for pronghorn across New Mexico plains, maybe, but even Jack O'Connor then used the 270. But this guy, Apostle, talked about Winchester 94 being everywhere in Arizona back in those days, so that must have worked too. I guess if your real goal is to have a giant collection of hunting gear that you got suckered into believing you need, well then go ahead and collect your collection. If you need a national match rifle with Lake City match ammo to kill a deer at 25 yards, don't let me break your heart. But if you do use that match-grade rifle to shoot a whitetail at 875 yards over corn, you are a great shot, but not necessarily a great hunter or woodsman. Mr. Ron, I respect the hobby of marksmanship and the study of interior and exterior ballistics and animal wound studies, but the introduction of that hobby has blurred the woodsmanship into something completely different than what is a true woodsman. The only way to properly test the performance of a cartridge is to lug it into the woods 5 miles and shoot a deer with it and see what happens. Usually with a 30-30, the deer slams to the ground and dies. Just because I know you love bullets, I will say this. I use a Remington Core-Lock 150 grain hollow point or the Winchester Super X 150 grain jacket at hollow point. I have never tried any of the expensive Hornady lever revolutions or the hog hammers or the deer Super 80 Super X's, and I don't know. I've taken with my Model 94 using Core-Locks or Super X bullets. Well, I usually get my deer dead within 2 feet of where I first shot them. I was using 170 grain for a while, but I realized I didn't need it, and the impact was 6 inches lower at 100 yards, so I just go back to 150 for everything. So there you go. We go from one gentleman who wants to make a tweak of a Wildcat cartridge just to be happy, and then the next guy just wants a 30-30 and he's happy. There's room out there for all of us. So whether you are the gear collecting type or you like to keep things simple, I think all of us do need to concentrate a little bit more on being good woodsmen, naturalists, understanding the outdoors and what makes it all tick. I mean, after all, I think that's why we go out there. I don't know about you, but for me, it's the draw of the deer in the wild, the feeling that I get when I dream about where I'm going deer hunting. You know, I don't just dream about big antlers. I dream about the mountain, the forest, the snow on the pine boughs, the smell of cottonwood leaves rotting on the ground, and the smell of wood smoke back at camp. And all of those memories come flooding back when I think about deer hunting. And the gear doesn't really matter all that much. Yeah, I like to play around with ballistics and loading and getting the perfect bullet and all the rest of it. But once that's done, I think that's just kind of part of the anticipation for the hunt. And then it's getting out there and being that woodsman and seeing the sign and smoking hot droppings and tracks melting in the fresh snow and the smell of a deer wafting in the breeze and all that stuff. Man, that's what makes it so special, guys. So yeah, concentrate on being a woodsman. Add it into whatever else you're doing, and that'll make for the better hunt. Now, Roger Goodwin 5533 has something to say. Let's see what it's got. Uh-oh. He's not too pleased with fish and game agencies and getting licenses. He says it makes no difference if applying for a special permit for 17 years and never getting drawn. It's a scam. Yeah. Roger, welcome to the club. I think a lot of us are feeling that these days. You put in for these preference points and you think, oh boy, I'm going to have so many preference points that they're going to draw me out for the best unit with the biggest bucks, and I'm going to have the hunt of a lifetime. And you start putting in for those, and then about 5 years later, you see if you can't get that tag now. And turns out a million other guys put in for the same thing, and they're in the same place, and there's only 50 tags available. Do the math. You're not going to get it. I don't know. It's just this preference point game that they started just doesn't seem to work anymore. There are too many hunters trying for too few tags and permits. So I don't know what the solution is. I think you're just going to have to go back to throwing all the names in the hopper and just hope you get lucky. It's kind of like winning the lottery anymore, your chances of drawing a tag. Gosh, years ago when this all kind of got started, I'm thinking way back into the mid to later 1980s. I had moved into Idaho and I'm trying to put in for those rare tags. And at the time, of course, it was bighorn sheep. I guess it still is. Probably worse than ever. And already it had a reputation of being a hard tag to draw. So I went to the local fish and game agency and I said, look, I just want to hunt a sheep. What unit has the best success rates for drawing a tag? And they said, well, this one, right in the heart of the wilderness, it's hard to get to. The sheep in there aren't very big. It's not real productive range. It's all granite. But there's not too many people who put in for that tag. So your chances are about 1 in 5. Well, good enough for me. Put in and drew the tag just like that. Today, I have no idea what the odds are, but maybe it's more like 100 to 1 or 800 to 1. It got crazy. So it's kind of a up and down, yin and yang. We want more hunters. We want more people interested in hunting because we need the political clout to defend ourselves against all the anti-hunters who keep trying to pass all this crazy legislation outlawing hunting. So we need a lot of good support and fans. But then when we bring new hunters in, there's fewer tags to go around kind of a thing. So I don't know what the solution is, guys. Now, Brian Titus 6634, what do you have to say? Well, designed in 1922, from every bit of information I can find, the .35 Whelen wasn't standardized until 1987. Surely there were many custom rifles chambered for it, and it was fairly common Wildcat cartridge, but it wouldn't fit your profile in this video. Oh, I know what he's talking about. Tate and I did a show in which Tate asked me, hey, Ron, pick one cartridge to use for your ideal moose hunt, but the cartridge has to have been made as available as a factory cartridge prior to 1950. So it was kind of fun. You had to think back now what cartridges were around. So you had the 30-06 and the 270 and the 300 H&H and 257 Roberts, and there were a lot of them, but boy, not as many as there are now. So I kind of had to scratch my head and think, and one of them that I came up with was the .35 Whelen. Well, it turns out the .35 Whelen, as this gentleman just said, did not become a factory cartridge until 1987, but it was created in 1922. So I missed that one, guys, and several of you commented on that video and told me how I screwed up, and that's great. That's what we want. We want you guys checking up on me so that I can provide correct information. There's a lot of people who just, for whatever goofy reason, the same reason I have, I guess, we kind of dote on all these little arcane facts and figures wrapped around cartridges and rifles and what we all do. I don't know why. It's kind of like a football player or a baseball player who has the stats on everybody who's ever picked one up and thrown it professionally. Well, I've got the stats on guns and ammo and cartridges and bullets and when they were made and who made them and all that fun stuff. And I think a lot of you probably know more about that even than I do. So keep me on the straight and narrow here, guys. Keep me on the toes and let me know when I screw up. The .35 Whelen didn't come out as a commercial cartridge until 1987.
So now that you know that, what would you have picked?
Oh, going back to that, I think it was for the moose. First thing that popped into my head would have been a .338 Win Mag for the moose, but that was 1958, I think, when that came out, so that wasn't going to fly. So then I thought of that .35. Now I'm thinking, in that era, it would have been a .348 Winchester. That was a rimmed lever action cartridge available only in a lever action Winchester rifle, the Model 71. So that would have been a fun one. That's probably what I would have taken, or the 300 H&H, I guess. Weren't just really a lot of big, powerful big bores back in those days. Of course, knowing what I know about moose, 30-06 would suffice. But when you've got a show saying pick your favorite cartridge for this animal, you can't pick the 30-06 every time.
Yeah, you can.
I can. Yeah, a lot of people would. The most versatile cartridge in the world. Well, it isn't, but close enough. Now, do we have a few things here from Betsy? Sure we do. Oh, be darned. Oh, before we jump there, I do need to mention my books here for you guys. 7mm book, if you guys are still scratching your head over which cartridge should I get, whether it's factory loaded or not, 7mm are, I think, a great all-around compromise. The 30s are maybe a little more popular with folks, but reduce your recoil a little bit, shoot a little flatter, find a lighter weight bullet that has a higher BC. The 7s usually beat out the 30s, and they seem to deliver just as much terminal performance as the 30s do. I just struck me as that's the perfect compromise. But there are a lot to choose from. Something like 62 different 7mm cartridges covered in this book. And if you want to get into predator hunting, we've got my old predator hunting book. Just a lot of folks still like to pick that up and learn the ins and outs of how to call predators and how to hunt them. I've got a lot of information in there about different cartridges and bullets and how they all work, plus how to call different animals, how to hunt them and bring them in. It's not the most common thing for most folks to understand how to hunt predators, so I've been doing it for a long, long time, and I put it all in that book, so you might want to check that out. Now, Betsy has put together a whole bunch of comments. These come in from the website, Bets?
Yes.
Okay, we have got somebody from Sweden here. A Swedish gentleman named Goran, or there's an umlaut, it looks like, over the O. So Garen? I'm going to go with Garen. Garen, we're going to hear from you. What do you think here? First, Ron, thank you for a really good show. Well, you're more than welcome, sir. Thank you for watching it all the way from Sweden. I really enjoy your discussions regarding different topics and that you most often have a very open mind regarding things. So my question, well, maybe it's more like asking for your thoughts regarding this topic. And this topic is due to hunting distances. Very often you and others talk about distances out to 600, even 700 yards, sometimes even farther. And yes, you might say that it's not for everyone, but it does seem to me that you all, yes, now I'm generalizing a lot, I know, but you Americans seem to have no worries with shooting animals at 400 to 500 yards. Well, not all of us. I consider myself to be a decent shooter with competing at 300 meters and also field target shooting out to 600 meters, but I must say that shooting at those distances is a way off for me. I don't quite understand that. I know I can hit a target at that range, absolutely, but boy, it takes that small miss from me or a tiny movement from the animal to get some catastrophically bad results, ending up with a wounded animal at the worst. Well, I might stretch myself with a shot out to 300 yards on game under perfect conditions on a moose-sized animal, but that is a very good day and with a perfect conditions and a setup and a big target. But for smaller animals and stalking when I'm hunting, I would say that a 200-yard shot is stretching it for me. And it all comes down to all the variables that matter at long range, especially to the movement of the animal. That really cuts some margins for a good shot. Also, those angles to the animal, uphill and downhill, your shot placement. So is this common in the U.S. to really be hunting at longer ranges, to shoot game at long range? We can all do a bad shot no matter what the distance, but do you think people in general trying to reach longer ranges make more bad shots? Or is it not representative that you see on the internet and read about all those who do those long-range shots? Are we training for that much more? Do you really shoot that way over there? Looking forward to your thoughts. Best regards, Garen. Well, we debate the same things here, but it is true that in the western states especially, we can shoot long range. You've got the big mountains and the open habitat, and you can often see game far, far, far away. And one of the arguments the longer range shooters make is that generally when game is beyond 400 yards, it likely doesn't know you are around. So it's very calm. You can assess it, you can look it over, choose the right animal, and set up. Because you have time, you can set up for a very careful shot. But I do agree also that too many new hunters or inexperienced hunters hear about these long shots and the cartridges and rifles and bullets and scopes and all these gear head things that make it work and assume that they can make these shots. And they'll probably practice off of a bench or a good solid bipod support prone and do pretty well on targets, and then they think, well, it's going to be the same thing in the field, and then they realize it's cold, they don't have the perfect position, and they take a fairly shaky stand when they make their shot, and they don't calculate the wind right, and all the things that you mentioned can go wrong. And that's why we on our channel here do not advocate this long-range shooting. Long-range hunting? Yes, of course, because we're looking for game way out there. I'll sometimes see it 4, 5, even sometimes 8 miles away. That's long-range hunting, but then I get closer. Even when I see them 600 yards away, I get closer. I get as close as I can. I generally like to stay inside of 400 yards, and more often I'm taking my shots at 300 yards or less, simply because what you said, I understand these potentials for screw-up. Plus, I just like to stalk closer because there's less chance that I am going to screw it up. I want to get my animal, and I want to do it right. And I would just advocate for that for everyone. Don't be, dare I say it, lazy and just set up for a long shot just because you think you have the gear and you think you can make it. And that said, I will also note that there are good trained shooters who probably make better shots at 600 yards than some guys do at 50 or 100. And that's another valid argument, is that some people who get really close to game get so flustered by that proximity that they get buck fever really bad, and they miss broadside, standing, dead to the rights, broadside shots at 50 yards. It's happened throughout history, and it'll continue to happen. You just cannot control buck fever all the time. So there's a lot to be said for both sides. But in general, yes, I don't think we should be taking or trying to make these long range shots. So thanks for weighing in on that, Garen. And thanks for being a hunter and supporting hunting over there in Sweden. All right, now we're going to hear from Brent in Australia. Well, we're getting around the world here from Sweden all the way down to Australia. Woo! We're talking a long reach. Brent says, hi, Ron. What cartridge would you recommend for shooting pigs that have been bailed by my dog? I think by bailed he means cornered. So my young pup is a little bit timid at the moment, and I don't want to shoot anything too loud, make her gun shy. So the mighty 22 long range, no, the mighty 22 long rifle cost me a good bore today. Oh, he must have made a bad shot, or that didn't work or something. So anyway, I'm looking for something else, something with a little more punch. Well, what do you think? Okay, something to finish off a pig that your dog has cornered, and you're probably real close to it. You just need to have a good bullet that's going to reach the brain, finish that pig without endangering your dog or its hearing or your hearing. And yeah, I would think the 22 long rifle would be great. Put it right there in the ear, right? But if you're looking for something with a little more oomph and not too much more muzzle blast and all, I think your 22 Hornet's probably the best. Yeah, get that with a fairly stiff bullet, a good solider bullet, not some varmint bullet, so it'll stay together on that thick skull, and it shouldn't have that much more noise. Another option, if you can't find a Hornet, would be a 218B. Not a lot of those around. 222 Remington, that's one of the smaller ones, and you could load it down if you're hand loading, but even at full power, it's not all that loud. So yeah, I think that 22 Hornet would be the one I would pick. So good luck with that. I know Australia has a feral pig problem as bad as the southeast U.S. I was over there one time, and I think I shot 9 feral pigs in 2 days. And I could have shot a lot more, but I was letting my friends have some shots at them too. So altogether, we must have been up in the double digits, few dozen. So they can really ruin a lot of habitat over there, the same as over here. All right, now we're going to come back to the States and go to Missouri, the show me state, where Zach wants me to show him something. Let's find out what it is. Hey, Ron, I love listening to your show, and to contradict others, I think that you used to keep me awake on long commutes every morning. Yeah, a lot of folks say that they use me to stay awake, but then a lot of people say they use me to fall asleep too, so I'm not sure. It seems like I'm an equal opportunity sleeper. At any rate, Zach continues, I shoot quite a bit, about 1,000 rounds a week for work, and mostly scoped rifles. I wonder what kind of a job you've got. A lot of people would like that one. I have a Browning X-Bolt in 7mm PRC. I'm having a little trouble with it. I believe it has to do with parallax on the loopholed 4-5 by 14 by 50 scope that I've mounted. I get fairly consistent groups of 0.8 to 1 MOA, but there's a POI shift, point of impact shift, side to side. I really like this scope, but it has a noticeable shift in the reticle as you adjust your head on the stock. Parallaxes he's seeing. I wish I had the money to buy a VX5 with a side parallax adjustment, but money is real. I tried to put a Mystery Ranch strap-on riser on the comb, but it didn't fit very well. My question is, do you think I should keep searching for something to get my cheek a little more consistently welded on the comb to line it up with the scope? Or do you have some advice on getting your head lined up exactly every time some other way? Thanks for your advice, Zach. Yeah, Zach, having a scope with parallax adjustment is the great way to do it, but they're more expensive, and if you've got what you've got, the cheaper choice is what you're doing. Try to get the comb just right for your head shape and position. Guys, what he's trying to do here, what we should all be trying to do, of course, is to get our eye perfectly in line with the center of the scope so that when you are seeing the reticle and the target, they are both in the same place, regardless of the parallax issue. Now, parallax, you haven't figured it out yet, is the apparent movement of the target in relation to the sight. And you can best see this for yourself with your fingers. Just put them out in front of you. Have one finger close to your eyes like this, just about 6-8 inches away, and the other one out there quite a bit farther. And focus on one out front, and the one close is out of focus. Focus on the one close, and this one's way out of focus, right? Now, think about a scope and what it does. Essentially, it's got the target out front here, and it focuses that inside the scope onto the reticle, the crosshairs. But it can only do that at one distance. So a scope manufacturer will usually set that at 100 yards or 150 yards, just because that's kind of a common all-around deer hunting distance to have that perfect focus on the reticle. And for general deer hunting at 4X, 6X powered scopes, it's not an issue. You might have a little bit of parallax in that scope for a 100-yard shot or a 75-yard shot, which means you could be off by an inch or so, but on a deer, big deal. And if it's farther out, same thing on a deer, doesn't amount to all that much. So the trick is, if you keep your eye perfectly in line with these two, you're not going to get this shift in parallax. So now let's go to what parallax is. Once again, do this, focusing with your fingers, one far out and one close, and close one eye, line them both up. Now close that eye, open the other one, and you will notice that there is a big gap between your fingers. You are looking with one eye to get them lined up, while your other eye's off to the side, so you're seeing a different picture. Another way to look at it is the old speedometers on cars had the scale, 10 miles, 20 miles, 40 miles an hour kind of a thing, and a needle in front of it, and that needle would move across it as you increased your speed. For the driver, right behind it, they were in line, so if it said 40 miles an hour, you were going 40. But over here in the rider's seat, if they looked at that, they saw the needle covering maybe the 30 mile an hour marker. So there's parallax issue. If those two were both together on the same chart right there, then you wouldn't see that because they're on the same focus plane. That's what we're talking about with a scope. You focus the image onto the reticle. Now, something else you need to do with your scopes, guys, the first thing you need to do is adjust the diopter to focus the reticle, the crosshairs, for your eyes. Everybody's eyes may be a little bit different, So if you need to turn that to get the reticle sharp, that's the first thing you do. Then you adjust your parallax if you have it. If you don't do it in that way, you can really get things screwed up a little bit. But again, standard scopes are set up for 150 yards parallax free. So if you want to make darn sure you're lined up like the driver behind that speedometer instead of the rider off to the side, you've got to keep your head and your eye directly behind that scope, not a little bit off to one side or the other. And that's what this gentleman is talking about. So how do you fix that? He's on the right track. Cheek risers. Your comb is a little bit low. You have to raise your head up. And then you're shifting over to the side to get your jaw on there instead of your cheek higher up. All that stuff starts to add up. You've got to customize the shape of that comb and the height of the comb so that when you cheek down on that, you get that cheek weld that shooters are always talking about. That gets your eye perfectly in line with the reticle and the target in that scope. And then you eliminate parallax, even if it's inherently in the scope. Whew. Boy, that was a lot to explain. I hope it made sense to you guys. If not, write in again and I can go back through it. Quite a while back, we did a show in which I explained parallax, and I was pretty spot on accurate with it. A lot of people wrote in and say that was the best explanation they had. This one wasn't quite that smooth, but I think you'll get the idea, especially with that speedometer thing. Just think about that. All right, Zach, good luck building that comb up. I think you can get her done, but it's going to take a little bit of work. Don't hesitate to use some tape and different things. I use some foam or pieces of leather, whatever you need to do. A lot of those aftermarket comb risers that you strap on that you're talking about, a lot of those you can lift up and slide things underneath it to increase the height. The straps are long enough to still connect. Play around with that until you get it just right, and I think that'll make the difference for you. All right, Jason in Utah, good day. Team, that includes you, Betsy. Thanks for your years of edutainment, just a combination of education and entertainment. Well, thank you for that, Jason. My comment regards military surplus clothing. It's been my experience that the garments have a UV dye in them that make you very visible to deer and elk. I speculate that they include this dye for identification of friend or foe. We were at a deer camp, and my niece had a flashlight with a black light option. She clicked it on, and I was glowing like a fun house at the fair. No wonder the elk and deer were running at great distances from us. So I took that light to the Army-Navy surplus store, and sure enough, everything on the rack glows when taken to the fitting room and turned in under that black light in the dark. So while the digital patterns blend in well for the hunting I do in central Utah for turkeys, I have to leave them at home for big game because big game can see this UV glowy light thing, I guess. Have fun and shoot straight. Kind regards, Jason. Yeah, Jason, good point. Quite a few years ago, I'm thinking 20, maybe even more, there was a big deal about this UV light. People were discovering it in hunting clothing. And what it is the manufacturers of clothing like to brighten them up. Makes your shirt brighter. The colors are brighter and everything looks fresh and clean and new and bright. So they put these dyes in there that reflect the ultraviolet light and makes everything glow. We don't really see it that way, but apparently deer, elk, and other ungulates do. So that can spook them, or at least you show up more readily. It's not like you've got this great camo pattern, but it's glowing brighter than the rest of the surround, so you're kind of looking white, I guess. At any rate, you might want to watch out for that stuff on your clothing. When I was a kid getting into backpack hunting, we were buying surplus Army clothes, but this stuff was World War II wool, and there were no dye issues in that stuff. There were some serious itch issues. But no dye. So these days, I think everything's coming out of within the last 20 or 40 years, perhaps, and it probably has some of these dyes in it. So you might want to watch out for that. Now, it seems to me, Betsy, that not too many years ago, there was a brand. Gosh, what was it? Somebody was selling it's either a spray or a soap wash or something that would kill those brighteners in your clothing. You guys tell me which one that is. You probably remember it. But if you're concerned about this, and if you have a bunch of good camouflage clothing that you think is glowing too much, look for that soap that takes away that dye brightness. Gosh, I can't remember what it was. But there's something out there. All right, let's go to Minnesota now, where we hear from Robert. I just wanted to say thanks for the great content on YouTube. Well, Robert, you are most welcome. We enjoy doing these shows. We hope they're useful for a lot of folks. They seem to be, but once again, we ask you to weigh in and tell us what you want to hear and see and do, and how we sometimes screw things up, because we want to give you the straight scoop. A few months ago, Robert says, I decided to let go of my A-Bolt 2 Eclipse Browning rifle in 270 WSM. I was getting tired of not finding ammo for it sometimes. Well, after watching your video on the Fast Twist 270 Winchester, I decided to go back to the classics. I ended up with an X-Bolt Max long range in 270 Winchester with a 1 in 7.5 twist barrel in a 22-inch barrel. There you go. Was also looking at getting a classic Magnum cartridge, and I was torn between the 300 Win Mag and the 7 Rem Mag, and your videos on the 7 Rem Mag helped me make my decision. I went with the 7 Rem Mag, of course. I decided to get another X-Bolt Max long range, but this one with a 1 in 8 twist barrel and a 26-inch. Thanks again for your great content. It helped me get back to the classic cartridges with a new twist. Well, you're most welcome, Robert. Yeah, the new twist is kind of a great idea. I and many others wonder why these manufacturers don't do more of this. The idea, of course, is that back when they designed the 270 and the 30-06 and the 7 Rem Mag and everything, they made the twist rate to stabilize the longest or heaviest bullets of the era. Well, those were mostly spire points with not that too sharp of a point, and then flat-based, so they weren't all that long. Well, you come up with these new longboat tail, sleek secant ogives with a sharp point and all the rest of it, and the bullets get pretty darned long. And that's why they don't stabilize in traditional twist rate rifles. So the manufacturers say, well, we've pretty much set everything up to the old system. We'll make new cartridges with fast twists, and that's why you come up with the PRCs and the 6.5 Creedmoor and the 6.8 Western and all these fast twist modern cartridges. But you really don't need those if you can get a fast twist barrel for the old ones. But then you've got the manufacturers who make ammunition. They're sticking with the old standards as well, so you almost have to be a hand loader to make this work. And what Robert is referring to here in our content on YouTube was Joseph Von Benedict and I took one of these Browning X-Bolts in Fast Twist 270 Winchester, and in addition to being able to stabilize long, heavy bullets like 170 to 175 grain in a 270, in addition to stabilizing that, we were able to increase the velocity, because not only did they make that rifle with a fast twist barrel, but they throated the chamber long so you could use long bullets, and they put a magazine box in that was full Magnum cartridge length, 3.6 inches. So we were able to seat those bullets out way further than your standard 270 Winchester does, and get velocities exceeding the 6.8 Western out of the old 270 Winchester. Well, hallelujah, that's the kind of thing the old guys have been looking for years. Get your old cartridge, there's nothing wrong with it. You just need to seat that bullet out further and stabilize it, and these fast twists will do it. So, Robert, what I would like you to do is let me know how these things are shooting for you. We got sub-MOA accuracy out of the one we were testing, so let me know if that's working for you, and if you take any game with it. And at what distances. I don't think just because you get one of these, you should then be going for these extended range shoots the way we talked about earlier. But I think what it does is it gives you more bullet mass and weight. So your 270 sort of steps up into Magnum territory while still being a 270. You've got a bigger, heavier bullet for deeper penetration on elk and moose and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of benefits to that. All right, now from California we have Garrison. Garrison says, your recent 30-06 episode got me to send this in. I'm looking to get my first gun. I'm currently looking at a Browning BLR lightweight in 30-06. That is a lever action. We tested one about a year ago on 30-06 week, and it was the most accurate rifle we tested. It beat out all the bolt actions. Pretty impressive. I'll say, Garrison continues, I keep hearing that I should start with something in the 22 long rifle to reduce flinching. Is there an age weight point at which this is not as important? I am planning on getting a Springfield 1903 and a Garand eventually, so I will be sticking with the 30-06 cartridge as a general for future use. Any advice is greatly appreciated. Well, good thinking, Garrison. I think your friends telling you about that 22 long rifle are probably right. You know, a new shooter jumping right into the 30-06 can induce flinching. You know, it doesn't have to, but it certainly can. Whereas a 22, you can concentrate on form and especially trigger control, learning how to break that trigger while holding that rifle perfectly steady and really become a good shot. Makes it easier to transition to a louder cartridge with a little more recoil. Now, the 30-06 does not have brutal recoil, but it might startle you enough to make you start flinching. So I would say start with a 22 rimfire if you can. And it's a great training rifle anyway. I always say a 22 rimfire is kind of the first rifle that we should all get and keep, because it's so versatile for use as training, inexpensive shooting, target shooting, fun shooting, plinking, small game hunting, hardly any noise, so you can shoot it in areas where there might be a little issue with people complaining about loud bangs going off, and that sort of thing. And then you're going to become just one heck of a shot before you move up to that 30-06. Now, you can take an additional step, which would be a 223 Remington or something like that. There you get the increased muzzle blast and a little bit more recoil because you're shooting a centerfire cartridge. And you can also start shooting it at farther distances to get used to what a flat trajectory at distance is. But, of course, you're going to have to buy another rifle. But most of us end up with that anyway. Another good option would be a 243. That's a great deer hunting cartridge anyway. And then move up to your 30-06. Now, that would help you to not develop a flinch. But if you have one already, anyone who has a flinch, you can cure that. And the way to do that is by having the unloaded surprise rifle behind your back. Here's how it works. You and your buddy are out in the range, and your buddy stays behind you and says, okay, I'm going to load you up, and I want you to hit that target. And he hands you the rifle, and you think it's loaded, and it goes click. Except for you think it's loaded, so you flinch, and he can see you jerk. You can see you jerk. Well, you just flinched. That's why you're missing the target. That's why you're not a good shot. So he keeps doing that, and he keeps giving you an empty rifle that you think he has loaded, but sometimes he does load it. And it's generally after you stop flinching. You go click and jerk that thing, and finally you realize you've got to watch the crosshair stay on target when you go click. I always tell people you should be able to see where your crosshair is when that gun shoots, when it goes click. And with no cartridge in it, you go click, you're going to see the crosshair move left, right, up, and down, or wherever you pulled it if you've got bad trigger form, or you're closing your eyes and you're hunching into the rifle to offset the flinch and all the things we do. So once you're now breaking cleanly, you can say to your buddy, oh, that was a great shot. I didn't move at all, did I? And he'll say, nope, I didn't see you move. I didn't see you jerk the trigger. Where was the crosshair? Oh, it was right on the bullseye when I broke that trigger. Perfect. That's where your shot would have been. Oh, cool. So you continue that stuff until you're really good, and then he slips around in, and you think now that he's never going to put one in, and it goes bang, and your bullet lands right where you're aiming, and hallelujah, you're the hero, and you realize your shoulder's still there. You're not black and blue. It really didn't recoil all that badly. And a 30-06 isn't that bad on recoil. Most people can shoot it routinely, no problem. You just have to get used to it. So those are the ways to do it, Garrison. Good luck with that. I think you'll do well with that 22 long rifle as a starter. Jeff in Illinois, do you ever do safari trips with clients? You would be a ton of fun to hunt with. Well, you have to ask Betsy about that.
At times.
At times, okay. Hey, I would welcome a hunt with you if you do that. You should. Well, I do, Jeff. We don't actually host the hunts. In other words, I will arrange with an outfitter or PH over in Africa for a hunt and say, can I bring along 6 or 8 people or whatever you have room for, kind of a thing. And if he says yes, I say, well, let's plan it because I've got 6 guys who want to go. That's as far as I'm involved in this thing. They're doing all of the contract and taking the money and getting everything set up for you. I'm just in camp with you. So it's really not my gig, other than I will give you a little advice while we're getting ready to go. But generally, You're going to get a good package from the outfitter. He's going to tell you the clothing you should likely wear, the temperatures you can expect, the weather, the preferred cartridges that really work well, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're going to have to book your flights and all. Betsy and I have been over there so many times we could book our flights, but we just get tired of the hassle. And what we do is we go to a booking agency that specializes in hunters, and this is Gracie Travel. We've used several over the years, but this one is kind of our favorite. And they provide someone at the destination airport to help you through all the customs and getting your rifle from the police and all this kind of stuff, filling out paperwork ahead of time. So they're going to be handling that kind of stuff for you, and they can generally find you the best flights. They will have their thumb on the pulse of what's going on with the airlines. Like right now, this year, United is just a lot of hassle for hunters taking rifles. Delta is better, or whatever airlines they can recommend, as well as the best pricing and all that stuff. So you guys do all that, and then we'll see you in camp. So this year we're going to probably be doing a week in South Africa and a week in Namibia, sort of back to back, so we can take two bunches of guys over there. We've got a pretty good list of guys who want to go already, but nobody's absolutely locked in and committed yet. But that's about to happen. So anyone who's interested in hunting over there with me in the same camp, and I try to hunt one day at least with each person, but generally you're out hunting in the morning, come back for noon, and we sit around and tell stories and share some fun, and then the same thing in the evening around a campfire. That's really the fun part. I'll be there for that. So, and also Betsy and I will be happy to answer some of your questions once you've read all your data from the outfitter and stuff.
We will make an announcement on our website when that happens.
Okay, go to ronspomeroutdoors.com. We'll put a big announcement up on there somewhere. And then those of you who have already written in and asked me about this, I've got you on a list, and we'll be getting back with you here pretty quick too. Say, guys, if you're interested in booking hunts in Africa or anywhere else, and this goes back to the question about the tags and not being able to draw one, there are tag services out there. They do the hard work for you. They put in for the tags for various states, so you don't have to go through all that horrible data on their websites to try to figure out how to apply for a tag. And our friend Tate is gearing up one of those. ProcessBasedHunter.com. Go to his website, and he should have already or soon have up how you can use his service to book your hunts.
Well, no, his is a tag service.
Oh, he just gets the tags. That's right. He's not booking hunts. Joseph Von Benedict is starting up with another gentleman a booking agency, essentially. What they do is they go to these places and they hunt with them to find out which ones they like, which ones they trust, guys who are doing it right. And then they take them on and they say, we'll find some hunters for you. So if you're looking for a hunt in Australia, Argentina, Africa, wherever, you just let Joseph know, and he and his partner will suggest you might do really well with this particular outfitter, put you in touch with him, and you can figure it all out, and then they'll book that hunt for you. I don't think you pay them anything. The outfitter pays them a small fee for getting you. So it's a nice way to go because you've got a trusted source who's a real hunter who understands good operators as opposed to just anybody. All right. I think that's good information for you guys to mull over. Now we're going to go to California and hear from Alex. He says, "Hi, Betsy, please put this in front of Ron. We know who runs the show." Yeah, Betsy is the one you guys have to get past first. If you'll put it in front of me, then I'll see it for sure. So, and then he says, "Hi, Ron, what happens to a fired and stable bullet after it loses velocity? Does it eventually become unstable and tumble?" Using stability calculators, I'm able to figure out that as a bullet loses velocity, it becomes less stable. I'm reloading my fondly remembered by Ron, and maybe for sale if Ron wants it, a Mark 77 Mark I in 270, and we'll see how that Barnes LRX bullet drops below the stability threshold at about 225 yards. Does that mean when my bullet drops below the stability threshold it tumbles? That doesn't sound long range to me. This can't be right, right? Right. It's wrong. I love everything you two do, and I thank you for making me the first winner of the website Comment of the Week in episode 416. I'm happy to accept my hunt with you and Betsy in Africa. Just kidding, unless you can actually offer that. Well, we can't give you a free hunt, but you're certainly welcome to come along with us if we go on a couple of them here this next year. Now, Alex, what I think you're getting messed up here with this stability threshold. The numbers they generally give on the stability threshold is the muzzle velocity. Your muzzle velocity has to be at least this much, not the downrange velocity. Once that bullet's stabilized, boy, it stays that way for, well, I mean, this is why they're shooting a 6.5 Creedmoor at 1,000 yards and still hitting their targets. And, of course, these days with certain cartridges going a lot farther than that. So it's the muzzle velocity is what you're needing for this stabilization. And then one other thing that happens, of course, is a transition zone between supersonic flight and subsonic. As Chuck Yeager, when he was flying the X-15 and broke the sound barrier for the first time, they didn't know what was going to happen. They thought it wasn't possible. You were going to blow up or slide into another dimension or something. So when he was getting close to the point where he was going to go supersonic, over 1,000 miles per hour, roughly, the plane started shaking like crazy. And boy, one of the reasons he was kind of a hero was because he was tough enough, man enough, and brave enough to keep the pedal to the metal and break through that. So what he was hitting was what we now know as the transonic instability speed level. When you go between supersonic and subsonic, you get this wonky area where it's hard to control the flight. Similar things happen with bullets. That's why precision shooters with .22 long rifles generally like to shoot ammunition that starts off with a muzzle velocity of 1,050 feet per second or so, subsonic to start with, so they never have to go through that transition zone. If you start with a 1,250 foot per second high velocity 40 grain bullet from a .22, it doesn't take long before it's slowing down and going into that transition zone, and then it starts to lose its accuracy. So there's a little bit of that going on, but I think you're just confusing muzzle velocity and instability with downrange stuff. Okay, well, I hope that helped you out. Now, I think that's all we have here, Betsy. Do we want to do a comment of the week?
Let's do a comment of the week.
Yeah, we haven't done one for quite a while. Who do you think we should give it to?
I think the guy, and I don't remember his name, talked about too much gear, be a woodsman.
Oh, be a woodsman, too much gear. I think that was it Brian? I think it was Brian. Yeah, Brian, and referencing the 3030 Winchester is a joke article. Yeah, let's give it to Brian. Brian, we want to thank you for all of your insights and funny comments on people who get a little too wrapped up in their gear and forget about being a real hunter or a woodsman. So you are our comment of the week. All right, that looks like our show, guys. I hope I kept you awake as you were driving to work or put you to sleep as you were going to sleep tonight. This is one of the extra services for which we charge nothing. I hope you guys have a great week ahead and hunt honest and shoot straight.